Hi, I'm Ken Kessler, and welcome to the Sounds of Christmas podcast. If you're new to this podcast, I'd like to start by saying thank you for joining us. If you're not new, welcome back. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Now, to avoid any confusion, I'd like to start by saying there won't be any music played here. This is a place for conversation. I'll talk about Christmas music and some related topics, sometimes by myself and sometimes with guests. If you're looking for music, just go to soundsofchristmas.com and click on the tree or the player on the front page or on the Listen Now page. We play the best variety of Christmas music all year long. Well, except in October, when we play the best variety of Halloween music. Hard to believe that's less than a month away, as I'm recording this just after Labor Day. The creeps that I want to talk about today have nothing to do with Halloween. It's actually in reference to what some complaining people like to say regarding any signs of Christmas that turn up before Thanksgiving, or even before Halloween. Once again, I've started to see those articles, blogs, and posts complaining about what some refer to as Christmas creep. This is supposed to mean that retailers are rushing the season, starting to put Christmas items out earlier and earlier every year. I think of it as more of a Grinch creep. It's really about the people who like to complain about Christmas music, lights, presents, all of that stuff. And of course, some are just people who like to complain, period. Sadly, we all know the type. I remember working in the receiving department of a large box bookstore almost 30 years ago. And in early August, customers would start coming in and asking about Christmas books. This was not about books to give as gifts, maybe to somebody overseas that would take a long time to get delivered. No, this was about books that were about Christmas decorating tips, Christmas cooking ideas, all of that kind of stuff. And this was not just one or two customers, but lots of customers every single day coming in and asking when we would have our Christmas collections out. I'm sure similar things happen at other retail stores. And while some Grinches like to complain about stores rushing the season, the truth is they're simply trying to meet their customers' demand. Seriously, if nobody bought this stuff in August or September, would stores continue to give it the shelf space? Despite these Grinches saying that Christmas is creeping into stores earlier and earlier every year, it's actually nothing new. I remember when I was in college and even in high school, one of our local drugstore chains always put out the first new batch of Bob's candy canes on September 25th. And that would have been back in the early 80s. And of course, this isn't just a retail phenomenon. Do you remember the musical version of Scrooge? Albert Finney starred in that movie. It came out in 1970, and it was released a few days after Halloween. Oh, sure, at least that's November, right? Well, how about this? Elvis Presley's first Christmas album was released on October 15th, and that was 1957. People at that time were upset that Elvis would dare perform those sacred songs in his rock and roll style. Irving Berlin himself tried to have the album banned from radio airplay, not because it came out in October, but because he didn't like Elvis's version of White Christmas. No one complained that that album came out in October. Maybe that was because Frank Sinatra had released a Christmas album a month earlier. And almost 10 years before that, in 1949, Gene Autry released his version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So over 70 years ago, nobody complained that Gene Autry was rushing the season when his Christmas album hit store shelves in September. Kind of seems silly to be annoyed at Walmart for promoting their new layaway deals or Target for having a couple rows of Christmas lights just past the aisles of Halloween costumes. They wouldn't do it if people weren't buying it. And for those creating Christmas-related things, the season starts even earlier. Mel Torme famously recorded the Christmas song in the heat of summer, decorating the studio with Christmas lights to help get into the spirit. And earlier this summer, Rob Thomas was working on his first Christmas album, and he had a giant TV screen put in the studio so he could watch Christmas movies on the Hallmark Channel to help get into the spirit. On the previous episode of this podcast, you can hear Suzanne from Suzanne's band talk about all that has gone into the creation of her band's forthcoming Christmas single. And on the next episode of this podcast, you'll get to hear Michael Sinatra talk about what has gone into the creation of his forthcoming Christmas release. They aren't rushing the season, and neither is your local Michael's for having Christmas decorations on their shelves before summer has officially ended. The Sounds of Christmas launches its new season on November 1st. I don't expect everybody to drop what they're doing and start listening. Likewise, everyone doesn't have to run to Macy's for new ornaments just because they've been put on display before Thanksgiving. But if you want to, you can. Now, we do have listeners on November 1st. Hopefully, they're enjoying their favorite Christmas songs right alongside new music from singers and bands they may or may not know. And while we haven't always been on year-round, We have always started our new season on the 1st of November. Like the bookstores, Bob's Candy Canes, and even Frank Sinatra, I'm not trying to rush the season. I just love Christmas and Christmas music. And if you aren't ready for Christmas music the day after Halloween, that's okay. We'll be on ready for you whenever you are. In fact, whenever you need a little musical Christmas spirit, we're here for you. The point of all this is that no one is rushing anything. Christmas is ready for you to embrace it whenever you want. And it has been that way for a very long time. In A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens wrote, "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year." Those last three words are all the year. Not just in December, not just after Thanksgiving, not just at any particular time someone else decides it's appropriate for you. All the year. And those words were written in 1843. That's probably why in the middle of September, which is when I'm recording this podcast, you can watch The Polar Express on HBO Max, or Elf on Stars, or all three of Tim Allen's Santa Claus movies on Disney+. So whether it's December or September, if you feel like reveling in some Christmas spirit, you don't need anyone's permission and you aren't rushing anything. It isn't up to anyone else to determine when you get into the Christmas spirit, no matter what the creeps say. Thanks so much for listening, helping me share some Christmas spirit, and for helping this podcast continue to grow. We're on about 24 different podcasting sites. And since you're listening to this now, you've obviously found us somewhere. But if there's another site you like to use for podcasts, check out our podcast page on our website for the complete list of everywhere you can listen to the Sounds of Christmas podcast. And again, the website is www.soundsofchristmas.com. Then just click on the podcast tab. For the Sounds of Christmas station, to listen to the music, you'll need to stick with our website or our app in the Google Play Store. If you have comments or suggestions, feel free to reach out to me on social media or through our website. Thanks again. And may you always believe in Santa Claus.